Hi there, it's Anne of Rosie Duck Designs here. Thank you ever so much for joining me today. For today's project, I'm going to feature the really pretty designer series paper from the Pansy Petals suite. So it's actually called the Pansy Petals designer series paper, and it's really pretty. Lots of lovely colours. There's some really quite muted colours as well as some really vibrant colours. So something for everybody. So let's start by sharing the paper with you. So obviously, as you would expect, lots of florals, but we've got a nice leaf design there. This is a very delicate design. This is the one I'm going to use today. And then we've got some really busier patterns with some bolder colours. There's also some really lovely flip sides, so really great backgrounds, which to be honest is what drew me to this paper in the first place, because I spotted it had some ginghams going on. And I can remember, I don't know if it's 2-3 years ago, we had some lovely gingham paper and I really enjoyed using that. So as I say, that is really why I bought this particular paper. But having got it, I then thought, oh, the pansies are really pretty. So I thought, let's just make a very simple card featuring some of the paper. And carrying on with the idea of just mixing up my base card a little bit, I'm using Pale Papaya as my base card. And it's one of the colours that's featured within the pack of paper. Now, equally as well, you could still use a white base card, no problem with that. I've just got into this habit recently of just trying to mix things up a little bit more with using up some coloured card. But I'm using basically the Pale Papaya gingham as my first layer. That is cut at 3 3/4 by 5 3/4. So that is, grab my metric equivalents. I should know these by now, but I don't. They don't stick in my brain. So that's 14.5 by 9.5. The base card is 8 by 6 scored at 4 on the long side, or 20 by 15 scored at 10 on the long side. So as I was saying, I'm using Pale Papaya as my base, but there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't use your normal white card. It works just as well. So not a problem if you haven't got the particular Pale Papaya. But we're going to stick with that. So I've got another piece of the designer series paper, which is actually the flip side to this one. So I'm using basically the same sheet, and I'm using one side as the central element and one side as my background layer. So this one is cut at 3 by 5, which is 7.5 by 12.5. I've got a piece of basic white which is cut at 3.5 by 5.5, which, if I'm not mistaken, is 14 by 9. So far so good. I've also got a little strip of designer series paper that I'm going to just use at the bottom here to pretty up the inside of the card. That is cut at 1/2 inch by just over 4, or a 1.5 by 11.5. So let's begin with adding that to the card. So I'm using the gingham side of the designer series paper just to marry in with the front of the card. I'm just going to stick that. I've cut this longer than I need. That way we make sure that it fits right across the base card, or the base card that we're adding it to. There we go. And then I'm just flipping it over and just trimming any excess from the back there. I've said this before, but the reason for cutting it slightly longer is that you can always trim, but if its measurements are slightly out, then you've got this tiny piece of white or whatever colour you're adding the strip to, and it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb, although it's only a very small element. So let's just put this now in the middle of the card. So nothing complicated going on at all. So I've cut this a little bit smaller than I perhaps do normally because I just wanted some of the border of the pale papaya to show. It's still got plenty of room for a message on there. So we're going to add the gingham side as the first layer on the card. Centralising that. And then the pansy element of the paper I'm going to add in the centre, cut out from somewhere. So I'm just going to put that in the centre of the card there, so we're using the card or making the card in the portrait style. There we go. So that's really it. That's the card finished as far as putting it all together. The sentiment I'm adding to this is thinking of you, and that sentiment has come from this new stamp set from the new mini catalogue. Not so new now, to be fair, but you know what I mean, the July to December catalogue, and it's this thinking of you. I love this new set, I have to say, and if you've seen my embossing video, we've heat embossed one of the polar bears, so can't wait to make a proper project with that. But the sentiments I've already used quite a bit of, they're really good. So I've stamped on here the thinking of you in pale papaya ink onto white card, and I've just cut that out using the stitched so sweetly dies, and I think it's the second one. Yeah, there we go. But doesn't need to be die cut. You could very easily just punch out using one of the punches and use that as your background for the sentiment, just so that you can raise it up slightly from the card. So I'm going to use some stamping dimensionals. You could of course just stick a piece of card cut at that sort of size and just stick that down without using a punch or a die cut. The choice is yours. It's the extra elements of course add to the card, but they're not essential, because one thing, it's about making a card for somebody, the fact you've taken the time to do that, but it's also the other little bits and pieces you can add to it to just add to the extra design. So I'm going with it down here because I don't want too much of the pansies to be covered up, and I'm also going to add a little bit of extra detail on here. So I'm going to, you won't be surprised to learn, put some Wink of Stella over the pansies. Again, a very minimal investment for a Wink of Stella pen, and yet just by doing this you'll add that extra dimension to your card. Just give it that little bit of shimmer as it catches the light. Now I'm just going with the heads of the pansies rather than the other elements, so I'm not going to bother with this bit, and I'm not going to bother with the pink. I'll go with this bit because it is a part of a pansy. It's just amazing what difference just this little bit of extra detail will make. I don't know if the camera's actually catching that. Yeah, I think you can just about see it there as I'm turning it. But it just gives it that lovely little extra detail. Then I'm going to bling the pansies up a little bit more by using some of these champagne rhinestones. I can actually get them out of the packet. There we go. So I want the little ones of different sizes, as you can see. Again, this is something that I use quite a lot. It's just that little bit of extra detail that you can add to your cards using these or the clear rhinestones. There's lots and lots of different embellishments that you to choose from in the catalogue. I'm just using my nails, since you could use some tweezers or the pickup tool. So much fun to watch me struggle though, isn't it? Yeah. Add a bit of laughter to the video. So I'm just putting these into the centre of the pansies, just to, again, just give me that little bit of extra detail. There we go. So that is that. And then my final bit of embellishment that I'm going to add, well, I'm going to see if it actually works. It may not, but it's got bees here, and part of the suite are these little bumblebee trinkets. I just want to, I haven't tried this before I started, but I wondered if I might put a couple on. Yeah, they're going to be absolutely fine. So I'm going to put one there, and possibly, I think, one there. I could put one there. I'll go with that, I think. So he's heading up to the flower, and this one's got to the flower. Again, a little bit of extra detail that's going to make the card extra special. Now I'm going to secure those to the front of my card using some glue dots, and they are metal, so they're quite solid. So I would suggest 2 glue dots, and you can scrunch them up a little bit to make sure that you're covering all the back of the bumblebee. So I've got a nice coverage there with my glue dot. I've been going in the right direction. It's always a good plan. So I'm going to put him about there. And taking this one, just another couple of glue dots on the back of this one. Obviously this card design, using this paper, I've used a thinking of you, but it would work with all sorts of sentiments that you might want to add. That's the great thing when we're using just paper, and there's no hard and fast rule. You can use whatever sentiment that you want. It's just giving an idea of just how we can very simply use some very pretty paper to make a very simple card, which hopefully finishes up looking very pretty and quite effective. So there we go, we've got our 2 bees on there, and the last bit would be to just pretty up the envelope, and I'm just going to do that by sticking a strip of the paper. Before I do that, I might as well wink of Stella those pansy heads as well. Now this is cut at 11.5 by 4 centimetres, which is 1.5 by basically 4.5. I've just cut this slightly longer than that, so that when I put it onto the envelope I can trim it. So same idea as basically we did with the inside strip. I've cut it very slightly longer so that I make sure the whole of the side of the envelope is covered, and then I can just trim any excess. So I'm going to go with, I think, go there. There we go. So as I always say, I make mistakes so you don't have to. So my tip of the day is make sure your envelope is going in the right direction. Not I stuck mine over there, then my husband's called me because something else was going on. So yeah, I had the envelope that way round and stuck the card like so. So I couldn't really rescue that, I have to be honest, because the flowers were going in totally the wrong direction. So I've got a new envelope, I've got a new bit of paper which I've cut at 1.5 by 4.5 or 11.5 by 4, and I've just put a bit of wink of Stella just on the little pansy bits there. So it's not as ideal as my previous bit of paper which was showcasing a complete pansy, but bottom line is it's going to pretty up the envelope, and that's all we're trying to achieve. There we go. So I'm not going to make the same mistake again. Put that on the side. So I'm marrying it up there with the top because I don't have such a nice pansy to put in the middle. And I'm just going to trim the excess from the bottom. So there we go. It's even simple stamping, simple cards, and I can still mess it up, but there you go. It's kind of what my tutorials are like, isn't it? So there we have our finished card and our envelope, and customary cat's hair, of course. So there we go. Everything that I've used today is available to buy via my online shop, so as usual I will put a link to that on the front. So I hope that's given you some ideas and introduced you to this very pretty paper. I'm going to be back with a similar design but using one of the other designer series papers that we currently have in the catalogue. Again, very pretty and just nice to showcase on a card. So I will be back very soon, but until then please look after yourselves. Bye for now.